Mary Jane's Venice History Tapes, DVDs, the 1st and 2nd of March at Pacific Resident Theater, honoring a century of the Tabor family in Venice. John Quincy Tabor, turning 90 this year, is the leading man both nights. The first night with Venice High School Centennial, elders also joining him in speaking of memories. Both sets of these tapes are DVDs, are copyrights of Mary Jane, Barbara Mostej, John Ransom, David Lang. Mary Jane is the realizer of these productions at Pacific Resident Theater in Venice. More credits: Mary Jane's Venice History Tapes for the 2 videos, March 1st and 2nd, with fullest thank yous. Pacific Resident Theater, our company, 25 years old in the 25th season, 703 Venice Boulevard. Venice Community Housing Corporation, John C. Ransom, Barbara Mostej, Sandy and David Mooring, the Palms Court Collective, Los Angeles City Councilman Bill Rosendahl for authorizing and will be reading on the second tape on the 2nd of March the large resolution honoring the Tabor family for over 100 years here in Venice. And thank yous to the Tabor family. Thank yous to Keith Stevenson and his Wee Small Films for doing video, and to Edison Stoll for Venice Paparazzi, and for Michaeltown. They both are doing still photos. Mary Jane's Venice History Tapes, the 1st and 2nd of March, 2011, with many thank yous there at the first paragraph of many people here in Venice. And a copy of this DVD for the 1st of March shall be given, possibly with a very small cost, to the Venice High Centennial for their centennial uses. They may only use it to sell it until the 7th of December 2011, and they must give an accounting of all the copies made and the copies they took for themselves and the copies they sold to Mary Jane, and mail it by the 1st of March 2012. This is the flyer poster that I did with great help from John and Barbara in the computers, since I do none. This is for the first night, March 1st at Pacific Resident Theater, 703 Venice Boulevard in Venice, California. Actually honoring the Tabor family, but the Tabors were the first blacks to graduate from Venice High School, which began in 1911, and of course their centennial is this year, 2011. John Quincy Tabor is the lead man tonight as the speakers of memories from older graduates from Venice High School, and he will be the lead person tomorrow to speak at Pacific Resident Theater for the Tabor family history. This is the second poster, the Tabor family, Pacific Resident Theater, Mary Jane, honoring the legacy family of Venice. The Kinney family is the founder of Venice, Abbott Kinney, but the legacy family is the Tabor family. The entire family moved out here from 1906 to 1922, and these are some of my pictures in there. The house, the Kinney Tabor house, and there's a picture of John Quincy Tabor when he was, in 1943. He was born in 1921, so the pictures are about then. He's also the first black lifeguard, and of course lifeguarding began in Venice. The middle picture there shows him with other senior lifeguards at presentations and exhibits that I did in 2000. And on the left, Chaton Valentine, one of the great cousins here in Venice, and Novelette Tabor Bailey, who just died last year in 2010, born in 1914 in Venice. John Quincy will lead the family in the family history here, which is huge, and he is a stunning speaker. I'm Mary Jane. These 2 nights began with the idea of the Tabor family, especially because of the 3 people that I've known, and especially 2 of them, Jotan Valentine, Novelette Tabor Bailey, and John Quincy Tabor. And I consider them crucial to the history of Venice and incredible people. And I recommended to Grant Francis and then to Tom Anderson that there be perhaps a night of seniors, since the Tabor family has been here over 100 years, that perhaps there should be a night of the seniors of very senior graduates from Venice High School for a night. So this is that night. Tomorrow night is the Tabor Family Night, led by John Quincy, which is stunning to hear him speak, and his clarity of memory and his joy of sharing memories. So there are, of course, 2 flyers and all the press things that I did. I'm going to mention quickly my book, not because it's really available, there are only a few copies available. Exceedingly Nonprofit, a seashore memoir celebrating Venice 1905 to 2005. It's in the libraries. It's in Venice Library, it's in Santa Monica Library, it's in other libraries. That's the only reason I'm showing it to you, is that you know it's in some of the libraries. This is Pacific Resident Theater. We are turning 26 this May. We are in our 25th season. Several plays have moved on to New York. Julia, which is playing next door in our middle theater, seems to be going there soonly also. I'm going to start very quickly. Did Grant Francis want to say anything other than the major events of the high school centennial are the 25 and 26th of June this year? Okay. We're going to begin. I'm going to hand this microphone to John Quincy Tabor. He will speak first, and he will pass the microphone.
Let the people say what they want to say about the good old days. Secondly, I want to thank you for coming. It's great to see you. And of course, you're in for quite a treat, because they got some stories to tell. And it'll be great to hear what Venice was like back in the good old times. So thank you very much for allowing them to create history again. This is a kind of a kickoff for the centennial celebration, which is in June. And the students of the high school have been shooting videotape interviews of some of these people at the Merloy dedication that we had, at the Abbot Kinney Festival. And then tonight's taping will be part of their project. They were going to be here shooting the last portion of their DVD. So if you're interested in buying that DVD, which includes this evening, you're welcome to buy it in the foyer of the theater before you leave tonight. So thank you for coming, and hopefully we'll see you in June at the high school for a big party, 100-year birthday party. Thank you for coming.
Well, good evening, good evening, all. Well, it's been a long time. Yeah. But I've been talking to a few here, and I realized that hey, we're all a big family, all of us, because we all, some of the older of us, of our family, grew up together. But everyone says John Quincy Tabor, okay, of Venice High. But the hero of Venice High, the person, in my estimation, and the estimation of many Venetians, some long gone in the past, was a member of the Tabor family, who was the most outstanding athlete in Southern California, who went to Venice High. His name was Ward Hafner. Now, there's a person, unfortunately, we should be celebrating, but he's long past, because he left a record at Venice High School that has been unsurpassed, okay, in the Bay District. Back in the days when Venice was in the Bay League, and you probably don't remember, well, you wouldn't remember, you weren't around. And later, when Venice became part of the city of LA, when Venice, in all respects, when we became a part of the city of LA, and the names of the schools were changed, and districts and so forth, and Venice then became part of the Western League. And as members of the Western League in athletics, we were the smallest school in the league. Los Angeles High School, Fairfax, Alexander Hamilton, Susan Miller Dorsey, which came into being in 1938 when we had the year after this young lady graduated. In the year of my graduation, Susan Miller Dorsey's principal came to Venice, a lady by the name of Griffin, and still Venice was the smallest school in the Western League. And as a result of that, we were most of the time the lesser of the score bearers when it came to football and basketball. The only thing in which we excelled in which we paid host to, was in water polo and swimming, okay? We were beach rats. We grew up on the beach, okay? So in that event, athletic-wise, Venice reigned supreme over all the others, the big schools. For example, when we graduated in summer of '39, we had the largest class in the history of Venice High School at that time, 197. LA graduated over 400 every year, okay? Anyway, what I remember about Venice High was that I started in 1934. The earthquake was March 7th, 1933, and we were downtown at that time when the bricks were falling off the building. And when I started Venice High, we started in tents, and there's pictures back there on that wall of the tents that we had at Venice High. And the picture where the Latin class was held is in the first row of those pictures there showing the tents. And you can see the gymnasiums and so forth and so on. And Venice wasn't rebuilt then until about 1937 or 8, they started reconstruction. And my father happened to be working on the reconstruction of Venice High. At the time that I was at Venice, from the 7th grade through the 12th, we had no junior high schools. We only had 6 grammar schools, and from whence all went to Venice High, junior and senior. So as a result, many of us were classmates, schoolmates, and friends from day of birth until college, because we went to the same grammar school, same junior high school, and then on to UCLA or SC or Santa Monica City College and so forth. So, not here tonight, but they're members of my group, and we're in scouting together and so forth, that I remember from childhood, okay, when we played in the street together and were in and out of each other's houses. The latter years at Venice, I remember distinctly because I was the first, well, most of, and even some of the follow-on speakers were in scouting and schooling were our lives, okay? We're at a scout meeting or at a school meeting. We didn't have radio. Well, we had radio, but we didn't have television. We didn't have anything to take up our time, except on Sunday when church, of course. But otherwise, so we were pretty much involved our entire lives in this small community of Venice, and we knew everybody. Everybody knew everyone else. We knew where probably each one of our classmates lived. If not the exact address, we knew the neighborhood. And it, small city, okay? And we were all small group of people. And we survived. We survived. There's an old expression recent that I might digress a moment, that this radio announcer, Tom Brokaw, spoke of us as the greatest generation. And I shake my head and I say, no. It was our parents. It was our parents. Those who found and created Venice and surrounding areas, those people, in my estimation, were the greatest generation, okay? We probably did a little bit, but thinking about it, it all goes back to the education and the tutorage that we got at Venice High School, okay? Venice High School started down on the canals, right behind what is, I think, called the Ritz Market, okay? And then it moved out where it was. And one of my cousins, well, several of my cousins were in the early classes at Venice. So when I came along, I was in the second group, because I was the youngest member of the Tabor family to be born at that time. I was born in Los Angeles, but we moved to Venice when I was a year old. So I was the youngest member of the Tabor family to go to Venice High, well, back in the 30s. But the one thing that I remember distinctly, it was my good fortune, because I grew up in scouting and I made Eagle, the first in our troop. And as a result, I was selected to go to the Fifth World Jamboree of Boy Scouts held in Holland in 1937. And when I came back to Venice, of course, everybody knew about it. I was the only one from Venice and one of only 10 from the whole Bay District. And of course, everybody knew about it because it was written up in all the papers. So when I came back to Venice in my 10th grade, my homeroom teacher was Mrs. Kirby, and she happened to be the journalism instructor. So you are to write. As a result, I was pressed into writing about the Jamboree and travel in Europe and so forth and so on. And then when I took music and art appreciation, right away, the teacher says, hey, he was there. He saw all of this. He knows all about art appreciation. He was at the Louvre and all the music and so forth and so on. So constantly, I was under the gun. And as a result of being that, I ended up as the editor of the Oarsman. And incidentally, I heard sometime later on that someone claimed that they were the creator of Through the Venetian Blinds. No, this was a character. Okay? Through the Venetian Blinds. And then later on became editor of the Gondolier, but clowning around because I was out writing all the time and doing certain things. I got an incomplete in typing, okay? And I was an academic major. I was going on to become a medical doctor. And I took typing because I figured, well, when you're in college, you type up everything. So I took typing, but I was spending too much time on extracurricular activities, and I got an incomplete. As a result of that, I was banned. I had to go to night school to make up for it, and so they took away all of my privileges. So they demoted me from editor of the Gondolier to sports editor instead of editor-in-chief. However, if you look at the yearbook of 1939, our yearbook was dedicated to a class that was dedicated to aviation. All of the letters in there, including Donald Douglas, Orville Wright, all of the people of that vintage, I wrote the letters to, and the answers you see in that book were as a result of my efforts in getting all of those people to correspond with us. So I still graduated the class because I made it up in night school, but if you look in the yearbook of that year, you'll see that I guess I'm on every other page because as a result of all the clubs that I belong to. But anyway, I remember distinctly everything that took place in my entire life in Venice, dating back to shortly after birth, okay? And from the standpoint of Venice Historical Society and my late cousin, I'll always be around to answer any of your questions that you might have about what Venice was like in the old days, okay? You're on.
Here's your sheet. Go ahead and read.
I'm Genevieve Foster, and I graduated in 1937, so you know I've been here a long time. I was in the first building that was 2 stories and red brick with white ivy, with ivy growing up the sides and white woodwork. It was beautiful. I was fortunate to be in that building. At that time, our dress code was midi and navy skirts. I was the hall monitor on the 2nd floor and idolized the good-looking seniors who were in the room next to my station. After the quake, our classes were held in tents and bungalows. I had wonderful and very dedicated teachers. I had Miss Kleinknet for math, for algebra, and Miss Schrack for English, Mrs. Woods for business administration, and Mrs. Abbott for biology, and Mrs. Schreiber for Spanish, and my favorite, Miss Summers, for international relations. Mr. Shaw was principal, and Mrs. Silly was vice principal. Students could volunteer in the attendance office if they wished, and I worked with Clara Swanson who continued to be active with the students. Sorry. As for sports, Venice excelled in football and swimming. Samoa was our main rival. The girls in GAA had archery, basketball, and volleyball. We also had home economics, sewing, and cooking, which was our last period. When my cupcakes weren't completely baked, I asked if I could take them home and finish baking them. Of course, that didn't go over very well. I was secretary of the student body in my senior year. Ted Lennon was my PR man and later became a vice president with Lawrence Welk's organization. Also, Isabel Denning, who was in my class, married Billy Lennon and had 4 girls who are still performing, having been with Lawrence Welk. About once a month, we would have dancing in the gym at lunchtime. Dancing was our favorite thing to do. Our graduation was held outdoors in the field. I believe it was the last time that we had formal dresses. We celebrated our graduation by going to the Cotton Club in Culver City, where Cab Calloway performed. I doubt if anyone remembers that. We also celebrated later by going to Catalina on the big ship, which is no longer used. For fun, we would go to the beach and have weenie bakes in Playa del Rey, which is covered with housing, and the ballrooms in Venice, the Aragon on Lick Pier, where Lawrence Welk once performed, and the casino at Ocean Park, where Eddie Duchin played, the Santa Monica Ballroom, and the Rendezvous in Redondo. The Dome Theater was also on the ocean front. Dancing was our main interest, of course. Our transportation was the big red trolley cars. At that time, the piers had all kinds of amusements, such as the fun house, the bamboo slide, roller coasters, and the shoot-the-chutes on the end of the pier. In those days, we had very little trouble, and the majority of good scholars, interested in school, wonderful teachers, and good, clean fun. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I started Machado in the 3rd grade. Now, the kids today don't know what Machado was, but Machado was on Zanza and Walgrove. And if you want to feel old, have your school torn down. Of course, the plunge is there today, but that's where I started. And from there, we went to junior high and Venice High School. In those days, they had the junior building, which is on the west, and they had the senior building, which is on the east. In the middle, they had the administration building. In those days, they had the service clubs in the junior high school. It was the Pages. One of the things that the Pages did is during the lunch hour, we used to monitor the doors, and they didn't let the students in during the lunch hour. So I was tending the door one day, and Alma Richards, which was the science teacher that I had in the 9th grade, he came walking through the door, and we had to open the door for the faculty. But when I opened the door, there's a kid that grabbed the door, and he wouldn't let go of it. So we're starting to argue, well, let go, no, and And Alma Richards heard this, and he turned around, and he reached out that door, and he grabbed this kid by the shirt, and yanked him inside and said, if you want to get in, you get in. And he shook him like you could not believe. Today, they'd put you in jail for doing that, but that's what he did. Alma Richards won a gold medal in the high jump in the 1932 Olympics. I mentioned the Pages. I was a member of the Pages through the 7th, 8th, 9th grade, and I ended up a president of the Pages. And then we went up to the 10th, 11th grade. They had the Esquires for those grades. And I kind of went through everything and ended up president of the Esquires. And the senior class, I was in the summer 45 class, and because the war was on and I was going to be going in the war, the attendance office, they knew all about this, and while all of my classmates were taking study hall, I was taking an extra solid. So I had plenty of credits to graduate, and I graduated with the winter class. I was elected student body president in that year that I was a senior, and we graduated in February, and in March I was off to the war. So the war was on Fortunately, by the time I got out of school, the war was over, but that's another story. They had the nights, because I moved up, I was only in the nights for a very short time. When I graduated, the big thing was being elected a Phoebian. And June Russell and I were the Phoebians for our class. Our class, winter class, was quite small. I think we only had about 60 people. So I can remember back to most of these things. And Venice High School to me was wonderful, great. I got a good education there, and after I got out of the service, I started college, and I was able to do well in my studies. And I probably remember some things. I'd like to say something about the Alumni Association. There was a person by the name of Newt West who did all the hiring in that for Helen's Bakeries in those days. And he started the Alumni Association, I don't know what year, way back. But anyway, I had a classmate was a member of the association, and she asked me to come join. Newt West was the president at that time. Well, we had a meeting after the meeting one night. Newt West had been a member of a president for a number of years. So we wanted to see about somebody different, new. So everybody was afraid to go talk to Newt. I said, I'll go talk to him. So I went and talked to him. He said, oh, I'd be glad to have somebody take it over. So Don Carlucci, who later taught at Venice and was a football coach, was the president. And I was in the alumni from this was the late 50s, probably 57, 58, somewhere through there. And we had a very active alumni association. The first alumni dance I ever went to was at the Elks Club in Santa Monica on Wilshire Boulevard. I can remember it was so crowded, you couldn't even elbow your way through the crowd or walk around. So after that, we started having it at some bigger hotels in Santa Monica. We moved it around to a lot of places. And I was president a couple of years, several different times, and we used to really have the good alumni dances. When the Airport Marina Hotel was first built, I took our dance up to that hotel. And the first year we were there, we had over 1,000 people, almost 1,100 people turn out at our dance. And we had 800, 900 several times, and we had it there for several years. And in one of the early years, I was part of a committee that went to see Homer Watson, who was a principal at the time, and we wanted to set up a scholarship. And so we went and talked to the principal, and we came up with the scholarship. I proposed that we not spend our base amount of money, but just the income we had from our scholarship money. Most of that scholarship money was earned by our alumni dances. Anyway, today, most of you maybe know this, but there's $1 million, over $1 million in that scholarship fund. I don't think there's another high school in the country that has anything like that. When I was president, a lot of you know Leonard Gottlieb. He was in the Alumni Association for not too long ago. And I got Dr. Ray Davis, and he was president for several years. And we really had some really good times. And the Alumni Association has been very active, and I must have been there about 25 years or so, and I finally thought I'd time to retire, so I retired. I have a lot of memories, and when we have a question, if there's anything I can clarify or answer for you, I'd be glad to do so. Fight on.
You pass that, Phil. Pass that next door to you. Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Rosie Johnson Main, and I graduated in summer of '49. I went to Venice from Machado, like he did, and when I first got there, I was a little bit in awe and a little bit scared because I wasn't very big. And the fact is, when I started kindergarten in Machado, I couldn't even start school then because I was so small. My parents had to send to Minnesota to get my birth certificate before they would take me. So you can imagine how I felt when I got to Venice. Although I did have a brother there and his friends, and I knew them, but it was still kind of frightening. But when I went to there at 7th grade, I had Mrs. Emily Tompkins, who was teaching English and history in a little bungalow back by the school there. And she was so nice and so sweet and so understanding that it made me where I wasn't afraid so much of all the other teachers I was going to encounter. But I did enjoy it. I mostly enjoyed the Friday afternoon dances, sitting on the lawn with camaraderie with all my girlfriends. We used to sit around and talk about boyfriends, school, family, whatever. And also over in the distance, you'd find the guys doing the same thing, talking. And so when I got there afterwards and everything, I got settled down. I did not take part in a lot of functions or classes or anything. I just enjoyed it, and I realized that Venice had a lot to offer the kids. They had singing, they had acting, they had shop, they had home economics. You name it, Venice had it. So anytime you wanted to go somewhere in your life, when you graduated, you would have tools to work with when you left that school. And I thought that was very good, and I enjoyed that. Although I didn't take up too much except typing and home economics and a few of the things that I would just basically need, because I got married and had a family and went on like most of the girls did. We were kind of subservient at that time, and that's about all we knew was get out of school, graduate, and get married. But outside of that, I think Venice High was great. I liked the fact, which they said, it was a very clean school. I never heard of drugs. I think the biggest thing they did was go on a weenie bank and smoke a cigarette and have a beer. And that's about it. Of course, I didn't do that, you know. No. I mean, you can tell I would never do that kind of thing. But anyway, I loved Venice High. I think it's the greatest school. My daughter graduated from Venice High. My husband graduated from Venice High. And I'll have to tell you one thing else about Venice High. They had the most awesome football team there ever was around. I don't think we ever lost many games. So, right on Venice High. Thank you.
Pass it. Thank you.
I don't know. I think maybe I'll sit. I just had a knee surgery, so I don't stand too well. Anyway, my name is Myrtle Biggers Lyle, and I graduated in winter '47. And Venice High School was just the greatest place. I went to Sunset Avenue School, and then they transferred me to Westminster. So I was in Westminster for 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. But then I went to Venice. I remember my mother driving me up so I could be, she drove me up. It was the first day of school. I think it was January 30th or something. And she drives me up in front of the school, and that time the special came, the streetcar, and the kids were hanging all over the thing, and I thought, oh my God, I'm 11, and I was scared. And I got back in the car, and my mother said, well, what are you doing? You have to get out and go to school. And I said, I don't think so. And she said, Louise, just get out of the car and go to school. So she says, I will pick you up here at 2:30. So I did. But it was kind of scary when you're 11 and you see this thing come down the tracks and the kids are hanging all over it and they come running across the street. I don't know how they didn't get run over, but they didn't. But I enjoyed every single minute that I went to Venice High. And I learned a lot. I really honestly did. And I had one problem in school. That was in algebra. I really am not good at math. I'm really not. I'm kind of a bummer when it comes to that. But I was in algebra, and I was in Miss Beamish's class, and she sat you according to your test scores, okay? I was in the last row. Not the last seat, the last row. And my girlfriend, Emily, was in that row, too. And she was up there doing a problem on the board, and I could see that she had the wrong instead of having a plus, she had a minus. And I'm back there going, all this. Miss Beamish says, Myrtle, stop telling her what to do. Oh, okay. So what do I do as soon as Miss Beamish looks the other way? I'm telling her what to do because it's wrong. And I didn't want her to get in trouble. So Miss Beamish says, come up here. Okay. And I don't know if any of you were in Miss Beamish's class, but she had a shillelagh. And she says to me, bend over. And she whacked me with that shillelagh. And I said, ah! And she said, but you get a plus. I said, what's that? She said, you get to sign it. So I signed it. I'm the only girl on that shillelagh. So it was an experience. Well, I went to algebra too, but I had Mr. Boltman, and he kind of liked girls, so I got around okay there. Then we had geometry. I'm back with Miss Beamish. She goes along and she says to me, you're not as smart as your brother, are you? I said, no, I'm not. But then I got Mr. Lusty for geometry too, and I was so bad. He said, would you like to come to night school and I will help you? And I said, yes. So my mom drove me up to night school, and I went in and had night school with Mr. Lusty because there was no way I could get out unless he helped me. But bless his heart, he did. And I finally got out of math. Well, when I got in college again, nobody asked me to take math, thank God, or I'd have never got out. And I later taught school, and somebody said to me, oh, your kids do really well in math. How come? I said, well, I was so bad at it that I'm pretty good at teaching it. Because, reading, I was super at reading, and I taught reading too, and my kids did well, but I thought, you've got to get in there and really love what you're doing to teach them. And I was so bad, and I didn't want them to be, hate math like I did. But they didn't, and it was a great, great experience. And I think my experience at Venice helped me become a better teacher. I never set my kids according to test scores.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I'm going to remain seated as well, if it's okay. My name is Tom Tolman. I graduated in summer 1947. I went to Venice High School from Broadway Grammar School. As a matter of fact, tonight with us is a woman by the name of Dana Beam Schlintz, who started in kindergarten with me at Broadway, and we went to Venice High School together. I had a couple of advantages in when I went to Venice because I had 3 older brothers that had preceded me there, all of whom were pretty good athletes. And one of the things that Mr. Tabor talked about, which was really important to me as a very young man, is my oldest brother. It was in the Boy Scouts. And Oberro is right. And any of you that have been involved in scouting know that they had troop meetings at different houses during the year, and when my brother would have that meeting at our home, I would sneak into the kitchen and my mother would make this big pot of hot chocolate and cookies, and I would listen to everything that was being discussed. And I met knew some of the finest people that ever was around Venice in those days. Richard Kazenza and Ed and Jack Adams and some of the people that when I proceeded to go to Venice High School, they were there. And so I knew some people, and that old scare tactic that they had, when you come to Venice as a 7th grader, what they're going to do is pants you and run your pants up on the flagpole. Well, that never happened to me because I had 3 older brothers that were very protective of me. And in those days, even at the grammar school level, I used to spend a lot of time at the high school because my brothers all were involved in sports. My oldest brother was a basketball player. Second oldest was a football player and was an all-city, all-Southern California football player. My brother, just older than I, was on the basketball team, an all-Western League basketball player. So in those days, many of you will remember, both parents worked. And so we had a lot of free time, and what I would do after school, I'd run out to the high school and watch all of the games and watch all of the practices, and it was a lot of fun for me. So after I began at Venice, I think because of my older brothers and because of their name, I became involved in lots of the organizations that Phil Bentz talked about. I was a page, and I think in those days, and I don't know what the procedure is now, that somebody had to nominate you, and grades and that type of thing cause you to be in the pages as well as the Esquires and the other organizations. So the fact that I had brothers there, the Tolman name was fairly well known. I began my athletic career in the 9th grade, and in those days you could participate in the 9th grade at the B or lightweight level. And so I played football, baseball, and track. And 10th grade, I went out for the football team and was successful in being a starting halfback on the 1944 team. And the following, that was a kind of a disastrous year. Those of you that were around in those days might remember we had gasoline rationing. And they had a rule at the high school level that nobody could visit other schools when the teams were playing. In other words, if Venice went to Dorsey to play, no students could go to that game. Well, Venice High School had a bye one week, and so being kids and we knew more than anybody else, we thought we would go see another couple of teams play that week. So about 14 of us on the team went to watch Dorsey play LA High School. Somebody saw us there and reported it to us, to the school, and all of those 14, including me, were made ineligible for the rest of the year. It was kind of a bad year. But the following year was a good year for me. In 1945, as a junior, played football, and I was selected the All-City Football Player of the Year. That was the first time a junior had ever been selected for that, and I'm pretty proud of that. Venice, to me, was a wonderful experience. I can remember some of the great times that we had. Casino Gardens during the war, all the big bands played there. We'd go to dances. Walking from my house to Ocean Park Pier, I would walk by the Pioneer French Bakery, and Jean Garricochet is here tonight, part of the Garricochet family that owned that bakery. And it was a wonderful aroma as we walked by there. I don't know if any of you ever experienced that. Yeah, it really is. And I have so many fond memories of people and of events, and one of the things that probably I shouldn't talk about, but Park Lyle, who was here tonight, said maybe I should talk about the varsity V initiation process, where if you were a varsity letterman, you became a member of the Letterman's Club, but in order to do that, you had to go through the initiation. And they used to take the kids down to the beach, and it was an experience that nobody should have to go through. But it was an honor to become a member of the Varsity V Association, so everybody went through that, and it worked out okay. I'm proud to be a Venice graduate. I have a lot of friends and a lot of memories that I won't go into tonight, but it's a real pleasure to be here to talk to you. Thank you.